Welcome to episode 2 of the BV podcast for March 2025. Spring is in the air, the evenings are getting longer, and our fair county of Dorset is emerging from its winter hibernation. Hello from me, Terry Bennett.
And hello from me, Jenny Devitt.
In this episode,
we'll hear from Jes Hughes, a trustee of Dorset CPRE, about the lack of rural public transport in Dorset, a county that's considered to be among the worst in the country for rural bus services.
I speak with Councillor Carol Jones about the rather wonderful Vale Family Hub at Sturminster Newton, how it's evolved and the really vital services it's now providing to the local community.
Easter is on the horizon, and for most that means chocolate. But there's a problem with cocoa bean supply, and Johnny Baxter of Dorset Chocolate explains what it means to their company. According to a House of Commons inquiry, Dorset is among the worst served areas in Britain for rural transport. The inquiry has been told that failing bus networks are widening social inequality. North Dorset, for instance, recently lost Nordcat. The lack of rural public transport is something that's of considerable concern to the Dorset CPRE. Jes Hughes is a trustee of Dorset CPRE, and he spoke to me recently about this form of transport, which, if it were an animal species, would be classified as highly endangered.
Well, I think public transport in Dorset has largely disappeared. I was thinking about our village where I live, and the last bus, I think, came through here about 10 years ago. So if you're waiting for one, it's been a long wait, and there's no sign that there's going to be another one soon. And we've really seen an erosion of public transport facilities outside of the main conurbations, which doesn't do much for encouraging people to live across the country and to be able to live well with transport and all the things that we need in the modern world, unless you have a car. And that's the problem. People are being forced into driving cars all the time.
It's a bit of a vicious circle, isn't it? I mean, the fewer buses there are, the more people take to their cars, and the worse the traffic and the pollution gets.
Yes, exactly that. And there is a council document called the Local Transport Plan, version 3, which was produced in 2011, which talks about great ambitions for improving local transport. They then did a consultation over about a year ago now on Local Transport Plan number 4. And we from CPRE put in proposals of what were the main principles we saw for the future of local transport. And really nothing's happened since. I just had a look actually at the council website today ahead of talking to you, and found that over 3,000 people responded to the consultation a year ago on the local transport plan, and we've promised there will be a draft of it out by late summer or early autumn this year. So something like 18 months after the consultation, hopefully we'll get a draft, and hopefully next year sometime in 2026 we'll see a new transport plan, because the one from 2011 is hopelessly out of date, and as the council admit.
So why the lack of action then, Jeremy?
Well, I think it's probably a low priority. I mean, the problem is, as with all council services, unless it's a statutory responsibility that they have to meet, like emptying the dustbins or providing for urgent support for people at the acute end of social care, there's not much money to do anything else. So without much money, there's not much incentive to invest in transport. One of the recommendations we've made from CPRE is that there needs to be a joined up approach across all the council. It's no good just talking about transport in isolation, and we really see the sharp end of that when they're building new housing developments, and we see that they're not really building in any provision for transport. So you may get quite a big development of tens or even hundreds of new houses, including affordable housing. But without transport provided, people who can't afford the housing can't also afford to get to work by car, and therefore we're in a jam, really. We're in a stuck position.
And as you say, those housing developments, increasingly, of course, they are put on the edge of Dorset's villages and small towns, and that inevitably means an increase in the volume of traffic, with all the concomitant problems then.
And exactly that. And when they're building and developing these new housing extensions of towns, they will put in a road system, obviously, for the new development, but they don't do anything about the knock-on effect on the very narrow, small roads that make up the majority of the roads in Dorset. So we are compounding the problem by not having public transport, which, of course, is a much more efficient way of providing transport for people wherever they live.
Here's a possible solution then, Jes. Every major new development, perhaps part of the planning consultation and the planning agreement should be that they provide some form of public transport, even if it's a minibus.
I think that's a really good idea. I mean, not only should there be some form of public transport, but there should also be an encouragement and incentives to support shared car schemes. Because if people were supported and encouraged to share car journeys with other people in their community, and for example got free parking in the town when they went there or something like that, that incentivized them, we could make better use of car journeys as well.
But we do tend, don't we, as a nation, just to hop in our car and drive off somewhere and not consider that that car could be offering a lift perhaps to somebody else.
No, exactly. I think that's something that we need to look at, and we need to find ways of encouraging people to think twice before they just jump in their car. And as they go out of their village, they follow somebody else who's alone in their car in front of them, both going to the same supermarket in the nearest town. It doesn't make sense, but something needs to change. But ultimately, more public transport ought to be the case, and CPRE nationally has looked at the situation, for example, in Switzerland, where they have a policy that every village in Switzerland has to have a bus service at least every hour. Well, we're far from that. I mean, we've got villages like mine where there's no bus service at all, and other places where there might be one or two buses a day at most. So that we're a long way from what is needed to sustain people to live and work in their rural communities and be able to transport efficiently and cheaply to where they need to get to.
That is an extraordinary example, isn't it? I mean, that is presumably heavily subsidised by the Swiss government. So this sounds like the sort of scheme that, if we were to introduce it in this country, should be subsidised and part of the responsibility of central government to provide transport for the disadvantaged areas, like rural Dorset.
It would definitely need subsidising, but the figures I've seen that CPRE have compiled is that something like 4 times the return on investment in public transport is 4 times higher than the investment on roads. So if you just spend your money on building roads only and don't provide public transport, you're only getting a quarter of the return that you could get from your investment. You can make it 4 times as much value for money if you also invest in public transport as well.
So you'd make the authorities would be better off by investing in a public bus service.
Yes, because more people can live and work in the communities across the country, or nationally and across the county in terms of Dorset. People should be able to get to work. People should be able to live a sustainable life of employment outside of the conurbations. But the problem we have at the moment is that without a car, that's well nigh impossible.
And people get more and more isolated if they live in villages and don't have a car. Of all the job sectors in this county, might it be the tourism sector where perhaps workers are worst hit? First of all, they don't earn much more, I don't imagine, than the minimum wage. And so they're hit by expensive housing in the places where they could find work, and then of course they have to live somewhere else, and how do they get to work from that other place where they live?
Yes, I think both people working in tourism and people working in social care, in care homes and carers, including informal carers who may not be paid at all but look after their neighbours and do their shopping for them and do things like that. Those people are hit very, very hard, and that's, again, undermining the economic viability of communities.
And of course there's also the issue of pollution, is there not? I mean, a bus full of passengers is less polluting per capita than if each of those passengers were to get in a car to make the same journey.
Yes, and exactly that. And it's not only the transport, of course, for passengers in buses, but we're looking at supermarket delivery services. The encouragement of e-powered cars and bikes should be a priority going forward, so that we're more effective and more efficient at reducing the pollution and making better protection for our environment.
There's also, isn't there, Jes, the social aspect of catching a bus. I mean, there are other passengers to chat to, someone to pick you up if you fall over, or help you in with your pram or your walking stick.
Yes, and the community action buses that North Dorset has, and I think across the Nordcat buses are a good example of that, where there is a community bus service provided for people who actually need that extra support. It's very hard to to get hold of it and because it's so limited. But it's very interesting when you look at that and you talk to people who've been using it, how it is a social event as well as a transport event, if you like. Elderly people and people who live alone meet other people and have a good day out because of the bus service enabling them to do that.
And of course that's something that would be very hard to quantify in terms of cost, wouldn't it?
It's impossible to quantify it purely in terms of cost because we're talking about social well-being, not just cost. And I think that's what we need to prioritise. And the councils increasingly are driven only to do things that are measured by money, but we should be measuring the value in terms of people's emotional well-being. And I think one of the things that's been a downside of not doing that is the increasing mental health problems people have. So the shortcoming of investment in things like transport and enabling people to socialise and be together ends up with people being isolated, developing mental health problems, which in the end put an enormous strain on the NHS.
And so we go round and round in circles. It really, Jes, it really requires a whole shift in policy and thinking, doesn't it, on the part of government and local authorities?
It does, and hopefully when this long-term plan eventually surfaces from Dorset Council next year, we may see some of that in there. But then, of course, it will need central government to put some money in, because there are also aspects of travel that are very important that promote both getting around and well-being. Encouraging active travel, so that's cycle paths, pavements, footpaths, more to support people to not just depend on powered journeys, but to do their own journeys. And cycling is a really good example where I'm sure many people have seen what I see is a very nice cycle path that suddenly stops when you get to a road junction or a roundabout. So just where you really need the cycle path, it suddenly disappears and it becomes very, very unsafe for cyclists.
Yes,
so we need to join up the cycle network better and maintain the quality of it.
Absolutely. I mean, I can think of several examples of what you just said. Do you cycle yourself?
I don't currently. I have done in the past quite a lot, and I've had some hairy experiences, particularly in London, where exactly that you're doing very nicely on the cycle path, and then you get to a major junction, and you're suddenly thrown at the mercy of lorries turning left in front of you without seeing that you're there.
Well, I used to cycle to work in London, and I stopped the day a taxi cut me up. And I nearly went over the top of it, and I thought, well, no, not going to do that anymore. Finally, of course, if there were regular bus services into the smaller Dorset villages, people would use them, and then that would become a circular system, wouldn't it? The more passengers there were, the more buses might be put on, the better served everyone is. Job opportunities might open up more to those at the bottom rung of the social ladder, who are the ones who are worst affected by the current situation.
I think you're absolutely right. We'll make better use of housing because people will be able to live in a wider range of places because there'll be transport to get them to and from. We'll get better social community aspects coming together, and it will be better for the economy because people will be able to go places, spend money, and boost the local economy. So it's a win all round if we invest in transport.
So we need to start campaigning for that?
Well, I'd urge everybody to keep an eye out, as we will be doing from CPRE, for when the consultation on the draft plan comes out. As I say, the council says this will be late summer or early autumn. So we'll be on the watch out for that, and maybe we can talk to you again and encourage people when that plan comes out to have a look at it and send comments in. Then I think we'll need to get onto our MPs and make sure that they earn their keep by getting us some funding for that transport, because Dorset is one of the worst served counties in Britain in terms of transport, and this needs to change.
And in the meantime, I suppose you won't be going out there hoping that a bus might come by, since there hasn't been one for the last decade.
I think it would be a rather long wait if I went out there now, but maybe if we all campaign in 2 years' time, who knows, we may have a bus service restored.
Jes Hughes of Dorset CPRE on the subject of the serious lack of rural public transport in Dorset. Time to make our voices heard on the subject.
Councillor Carol Jones is with me today to talk about the Vale Family Hub. Thank you, Carol, for coming on, first of all.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's an absolute pleasure.
And do tell us, what is the Vale Family Hub? I know it's in Sturminster Newton, but there seems to be an awful lot of hubs around these days. What's this one all about?
Sturminster Newton is the metropolis of Dorset. Let's get that straight.
Okay, got that.
So, for the last 4 years, we've been running what was the Vale Pantry, and the Vale Pantry was a social supermarket. But the shop premises we had, which were very kindly gifted to us in terms of no rent, they were very, very small. So whilst we were able to supply a great range of fresh foods, and we have fed so many families, I mean, we've literally been probably feeding, we've done about 9,000 odd shops each year for different families. We didn't have any quiet space to really get to grips and help people that really wanted to sit down and talk and offload and find further help. There was quite a lot we were able to do, but not enough. So the idea was born that if we could just find bigger premises, we could do so much more, and we could really expand the level of help and just give people somewhere that they can go, they can get help, they can sit down and chat, they can find friendship, they can join activities, they can let their children play. So we found a warehouse unit, which it wasn't in a good condition, let's say. So we knew we had an awful lot of work to do, and it's taken 18 months and £300,000, but we have got there. So our unit now, when you walk into it, it's just fabulous. It looks so warm and welcoming. From the outside, you think, oh, I don't know, it's a bit strange. It's on an industrial estate. But when you walk in, you're immediately hit with a beautiful little soft play area with children playing. Then there's another little soft area for babies. And then we've got a lovely, great big cafe area and a kitchen, which is to die for. And then we've got some breakout meeting rooms. But we've also moved the pantry over there as well. So we still offer the food element. But by opening the hub, we've done a lot of work with Dorset Council, because they were looking at setting up family hubs. And I always felt that our hub would actually be the perfect family hub as well. So in order to be a main family hub through Dorset Council, because we did get some capital funding from them, it basically meant we had to offer a total of 24 brand new services. So those services include everything to do with child support, so infant feeding, early language, home learning, parent and infant relationships, parenting support. We've got play groups, stay and play, and early childhood education and care, and SEND support. And then for adults, I mean, it's all about supporting families, but we also deal with supporting those that are fleeing or are in domestic abuse situations. And it's just about sort of giving people somewhere to go. But it's so much more than that, because we also run a few programs around mental health, substance misuse, stopping smoking. We've got a citizens advisor, so we do everything with debt and welfare, and housing issues. So those are some of what we do, but not all.
Well, that's certainly a good starting point.
It's a one-stop shop.
Yeah. It sounds excellent. Now, if I'm understanding it correctly, the Vale Pantry was a facility that provided affordable food for disadvantaged families.
Yes.
So really what you're saying is that you noticed from that that was becoming more of a community hub. You needed somewhere where people could get together and chat. So this is where the hub has come from. And typically then, who are your users? Are they the former users of the Vale Pantry, or I imagine it's expanded?
Some of them definitely, yes, many are, but there's also just mums and parents and carers coming from all over, really, because the soft play area is fabulous. It's completely free. People don't have to book, they don't have to spend any money, they can just turn up, and it's just somewhere where they can sit down and have a chat and have a coffee, and the kids can run riot, and we have organised activities for the youngsters as well. The pantry still works in the way that it used to, in that is a membership type of approach, simply because the food is heavily subsidised and we have to raise the money for that. So when somebody needs that aspect of affordable food, we do a little bit of work with them. We try to find out what's actually going on, what's underneath the need for food, because if they're in food poverty, something's going wrong somewhere. It may well be a short-term crisis. The car's broken down, it's going to cost £700 to fix. It could be, somebody's out of work, but they've got a job now, and they don't get their first paycheck for a month, until a month later. But there will be people that are have long-term illnesses, such as fibromyalgia. There are people undergoing cancer treatment and all sorts, really. A third of those that visit us are single parent families. What we always wanted to do was to give somewhere just warm and welcoming where people could just sit and chat. That was really important. There's a lot of issues around mental health, and very often people just want to be able to sit, they want to talk, but they also want to be listened to, and that's really important. So we have a whole host of wonderful volunteers, and they're more than happy to sit down and natter the day away with a cup of coffee and a slice of cake and so on and so forth. So it's just trying to bring everything together, because at the end of the day, if somebody's in food poverty and you supply them food, that's just a sticking plaster. And in that respect, many food banks, and they're excellent at, what they do with crisis boxes, but that's just a sticking plaster. We always wanted to get underneath the skin of it to see how much further can we go? What difference can we make? Can we help people into new lines of work? Can we give them a volunteer opportunity to build their confidence and their self-esteem and so on? So in the last 4 years with the Vale Pantry, we've managed to get well over 640 families back on their feet. So we think we can really make great strides from there with everything else we've now got to offer.
You're saying that for obvious reasons, to access the subsidised food, you have to be registered in some way. But users of the wider facility, can anybody...
No, they don't. They can just turn up.
Okay.
Just to absolutely.
So if you fancy
absolutely.
just going down and having a natter and a coffee and a piece of cake, then just show up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. I mean, the thing is, we do require a membership for the affordable food content simply because of the money we have to raise to buy the food. I mean, people think, oh, your food is just free, it's donated. Well, it's not. We purchase it. And, there were times where we've been spending anywhere between £10,000 and £15,000 a month on food. And that really takes some fundraising. And that is our biggest challenge. The biggest challenge we have is money. It's always money.
Looking at the actual numbers here, the boring part of it, it's cost you 285,000 so far, and it's going to reach 300, not far off it.
Yeah.
Running costs are about 350,000 a year. How on earth have you raised that money in the first place? And how are you going to keep funding it? I mean, it's
blood,
enormous,
sweat and
isn't
tears,
it?
I tell you. I didn't actually know I would be any good at writing funding bids. It was brand new to me. And I have been fairly successful in achieving funding bids. So we've had some money from the lottery. We've had money from wonderful organisations such as Garfield Western, the Valentine Trust, the Postcode Lottery Trust. I will ask everybody and anybody. But most importantly, we have a group of amazing local people in the community who give us a monthly donation. We're quite happy to take one-off donations, but monthly donations, whether it's £5, £10, £50, whatever it is, if we know it's coming in each month, that really helps us plan and work out, okay, we can take on 2 more families this week or we can't. And so that money brings in about £3,500 a month. And then those having the affordable food content, we ask them for a contribution. We ask them for a contribution of £7 towards the food that they take. For every £7 that's given to us, it costs us between £24 and £27. That's what the cost is to us. So we do get some income in that respect, and we do everything we can. We get pubs to do raffles for us. We put on events. I believe we're running the tea tent at the Three Oakfords Rally again this year. It's blinking hard work.
And you don't get any central funding from the council at all?
We've had some funding from Dorset Council because we have become a main family hub. That was for capital. We had £50,000 from them to help us towards the capital costs. And they have given us £48,000, and that's over 2 years towards our salary costs. So we employ 4 people. They all came to us initially with problems, with issues and needing help. And so we've sort of been on quite a journey with them. So we've helped them, we've mentored them, we've found outside help for them. Then we got them to volunteer with us, and now they are employed, which, that's something that makes my heart sing. I love that. Our salary costs work out to be about £100,000 a year with employer costs. So we've got 24,000 from Dorset Council per year for 2 years. Everything else, I've got to raise money for. It's tough. It's really tough. Because we've got a cafe, that is a revenue stream, and that's what we've really got to build on. So if people, can't do anything else, just come and buy a coffee from us, because one, the coffee is amazing. Our coffee machine is the best. And it's absolutely delicious. And just come and watch the children play and people talk. And if you're on your own, it's the most wonderful place just to come and find friendship.
Well, it sounds wonderful. I shall certainly pop in and have a coffee. Just tell us a little bit more about the 24 key services that you provide, including, you said, speech and language, SEN support, domestic abuse.
Yes.
Do you have particular experts in to help with those?
Yes.
Or who?
Some of these areas we will signpost out. But when I say signpost out, we've got different groups and statutory agencies that are coming in to work alongside us. Say we're looking at mental health, for example. Well, we're running a programme called Mission of Mindset, which is aimed at probably more women than men, but it could be open to men. But it's exactly for the type of person that gets increasingly anxious. They can't regulate their emotions. They snap really easily. They're probably on antidepressants, or they're thinking about going on to antidepressants. And that is something that we've brought somebody in to run that for us. And it's just transformative. And it's all about recognizing trigger symptoms and so on and so forth. Domestic violence and abuse. We have a number of members that have actually gone through that. They are very happy to sit down and talk to somebody, but we'll bring in an agency to do that. We've got social workers and family workers working alongside us and coming in and out and doing a lot of drop-in work as well. So that if we don't have somebody there and then, we'll find somebody. Where there's a will, there's a way.
You're open 6 days a week, 7:30 in the morning till 6:30 in the evening. So this isn't sort of 3 hours every other Tuesday. This is quite a commitment, isn't it?
If you're going to do it well.
Quite right. And you're currently supporting 360 families, which I guess is going to rise.
The pantry. That's through the food element. But in terms of, there are so many other people that are just popping in and out. We'll have people that are popping in from the business part that we're on the industrial estate just for lunch or something. And then we've got mums who come in with children's clothes that are good quality that their kids are grown out of, and we take them and we can upcycle them to women who need them. And we're open to absolutely everybody, really. But the reason that we open at 7:30 in the morning is that we're providing breakfast to any youngster on their way to the high school that perhaps hasn't had breakfast at home for whatever reason. Too many arrive at school hungry, not having eaten. So we're also open to, we have what we call a homework corner. So if youngsters want to come into us and do some homework after school, perhaps they don't have a quiet place at home to study, or perhaps they just don't want to go home at that time, they can come into us and just hang out, do some work. We'll find them a snack and a drink. We've got computers, so they can work on the computers, or indeed people can just come in and work with us, and just, if they're doing some admin, we've got the space where they can do that as well.
It sounds excellent. What a great facility for the folk of Sturminster Newton and thereabouts. And I suppose your message really is for everybody. Come in, have a coffee, see what it's all about.
Have a coffee. Can you help us? I mean, this is not just for Sturminster Newton. We cover all of North Dorset. We are the main family hub for the whole of North Dorset. So if you can get to us, come on in. We would love to see you. Bring the kids. They just have the best time.
Carol, thank you very much for coming on and telling us all about it.
Thank you so much. I've enjoyed it.
For those of us who love chocolate, and I guess that means most of us, we'll be having to spend a bit more on those delicious chocolates, as there's a problem with cocoa bean supply. Climate change takes most of the blame, as it's affecting production. Most of our chocolate originates in West Africa, where several countries grow the bulk of the delicious beans. So how are increased costs and reduced supply affecting Dorset small-scale, high-end chocolate makers? Dorset Chocolate near Sturminster Newton produces fine quality chocolates. Johnny Baxter is the chocolatier there, and he told me they source their high-quality beans from the north coast of South America.
In fairness, we've always had a problem with cocoa. So cocoa is often used as an intermittent plant. It's often grown in the shade of larger trees. It's a bit more sporadic. You don't tend to have huge plantations. It's not like a vineyard or something like that. And it's always suffered from blight. You've had bursts of diseases picking up. Back in the 17th century, the Dutch would have taken cocoa trees out to the Far East and grown them there. The British out to West. So you've had West Africa has been the bulk of the sort of the standard tree, non-specialist tree, and that's a variety that's been developed over the years to withstand disease a little bit more than a specialist one.
So what does the blight do to the tree? I mean, what is this? Is this like potato blight?
I specialise in sweet stuff, so I don't know as much about potatoes, but I know that we've had some University of West of England has been working on research for 20, 30 years, and it's not a real problem they've solved, but it can flare up every now and again. But I think the most recent problem for the last 2 years has been more to do with rainfalls and dryness, that sort of thing. That's the cause of the current problem in terms of that was the spark. But I think a lot of the city boys, future traders, they've jumped on the bandwagon and really pushed the prices up, which has now meant that some of the really big producers of cocoa have been buying up plantations and trying to sort of cut off the source. So there's talk that we're heading towards a situation where it's hard to get supply in the future. But nobody really knows what's around the corner. We think we're about the top of the price, but the price has risen fourfold in the last 18 months, 2 years, and up again about 12% this month. So nobody's quite sure what's going to happen. This time last year they thought that was the peak and prices would come down, and they went back up. So we're just not sure. It's all a bit up in the air at the moment.
Do you spend some of your time then watching what the cocoa futures market is doing?
No, that's for traders. But we're lucky that we've got supply routes available to us that we've sort of garnered over many years, and we don't deal in huge volumes. So we're hopeful that we've got a pretty good supply for the long term, even though the price has gone up. When the price was quite low, we paid more. Now we're paying market prices. But those relationships, hopefully, the growers, the makers, the processors, we're all in the same boat. We're not sure what's going to happen in the future. So everyone's got a bit more nervous. You've seen a lot of producers in this country starting to go out of business. You've got some larger firms locally that have gone out of business last summer. You've got one or two worried about where they're going to be in the next few months. And nationally, you've started to see a lot of small-scale machinery hit the market. So everyone sort of got through to Christmas, and then they've thrown in the towel from there, really.
So from what you're saying, it kind of looks as if chocolate, our beloved chocolate, is sort of heading towards a future of being a luxury item.
Yeah, I mean, it is. And I suppose if you take a step back, it's very hard short-term. So I would pick up on two areas, really. One would be chocolate itself. So I was lucky enough to train under chocolatiers who had trained in the 50s and 60s. And back then, you'd had a very good apprenticeship system and a lot of medium-sized chocolate companies. So one of the men I trained under was David Sylvester, and he was quite high up at a firm called Fuller's, who had a big chain of tea shops and sort of tea rooms in London, not the brewery, but tea shops, and they were bought out by Forte in the 60s, 64, something like that. And he did a 7-year in one firm, right the way through from taking the beans in, sorting the beans, sourcing the beans, processing the beans, and even did a little stint in accounts. So his apprenticeship for 7 years gave him a full knowledge of the industry. And now you just don't get that. So when I trained under him, he still had contacts in the industry. So I lived with him and his family for a couple of years, worked for him, and then he sent me off to someone in Leeds who he knew from the trade. Now at that time I worked with the only remaining sugar boiler in Leeds, and they ran their whole factory off a huge stationary steam engine which pumped out steam to sort of heat the fudge pans and all of that. There'd once been about 7 or 8 big firms in Leeds. There was one left, and that now left Leeds shortly after I left them, and the machinery was sold off to Poland. So we haven't got the medium-sized firms to train with. And I did a little stint for a year as a pastry chef, and that took me into the sort of Michelin world. But I was always just a passing visitor, really. Although I worked there for a year, I did a sort of stage there, but it was a different sort of world, because I was always a confectioner and chocolatier and less of a pastry chef. So, for example, my baking skills were a bit rusty, but I enjoyed the presentation work in a Michelin environment. So you have got 1 or 2 people that have come from that sort of background. I then did a stint in France and worked with some great French chocolatiers, and they've really kept the craft of the chocolatier alive, although I think our tradition, our history in the UK is far stronger in terms of breadth of recipes. So we do a lot of... the French will do pralines and truffles, whereas we will do caramels, different forms of fudges and marshmallows, fondants, a much broader range, especially when you take our sweets into account. You'll see that on holiday. You might see some Haribo in France, but you don't see the breadth of sweets that we have. And I think one of the problems we've had is that a lot of people have entered the chocolate market and they've done a weekend course in chocolate, but they haven't got the knowledge to understand what they're doing. And I think that's what we're seeing in this market at the moment, that a lot of people haven't got the ability to change their recipes because they're just simply buying a few recipes, making that product, and that's it. So when the cocoa price has gone up, they're often buying chocolate in and melting it down and reusing it, so they're not working with cocoa itself, and they haven't got the ability to change the recipe. So how we all change is crucial. So it's quite an exciting time as well as a scary time in the industry, I think.
A very uncertain market. So Johnny, you're making your chocolate from the beans as opposed to bulk chocolate.
We are. Now, we don't roast our beans here, so we get them part processed, but we are mixing our own chocolate and winnowing it, all sorts of things. So we're pretty close to picking off the branches, but for the sake of sending it over here, we don't take it out the pods, that sort of thing.
So when you talk about winnowing, what do you mean?
Well, again, in this market, we're seeing huge changes happening quite quickly. So normally you take the pods out and then you take the beans out and you dry it. And then you go through a process of extracting the butter, extracting some of the solids in the bean itself and mixing it all together, and you're grinding it together to make a smooth paste and adding sugar. Now, if you then want to make a milk chocolate, you would add milk powder. And if you wanted to make a white chocolate, you would use predominantly sugar, milk powder and butter, although you can get very rare white cocoa solids, but that's a very small marketplace. So that's the general process of chocolate, but there have been experiments now on the continent where they're using much more of the pod itself, so the flesh of it. And that, I suppose, is a bit like if you bought a banana, a large amount of the weight is in the peel, and you throw the peel away. And what they're trying to do now is to use much more of the pod itself, not just the beans inside it. Does that make sense?
That's very interesting, because I understood that the beans are in this big fat pod, and the beans are the seeds, and they're surrounded by a sort of white, fleshy looking stuff, which I gather tastes a bit like light cheese.
Yeah, I mean, I think shelf life's a problem. But yeah, it's fundamentally a fruit, and when you see the pods in real life, you really get that impression it's a fruit. What we use in this cup you would tend to buy as a chocolate, I suppose, is a long shelf life version, and it's very easy to forget it's a fruit. But it's it's amazing the variety of aromas you get from different pods and different beans.
So much the same as different vineyards produce wines with different flavours. You get an equivalent thing with cocoa beans, do you?
To a degree, yeah. To a degree. It's probably not quite so obvious, but yes, it is. Yeah, it is that sort of way.
Be obvious to a fine palate like yours. So when you say they're thinking of using the pod, that the outer shell, would that have any of the flavour of the seeds?
It may have a different flavour, but it's going to have some sort of flavour. I haven't tried it yet. It's all done at university level at the minute, but I know that there's quite a lot of report in sort of trade magazines about this coming to market at some point soonish, sort of in the next year or so. So we'll have to see. But I think the point is that everything's in flux. I know that the olive market, for example, you've got olive producers who are struggling with the price of olives, so they're looking to use their skills in other areas, and I think this is what you're going to see in the chocolate market. Now, in an industrial level, you've got people who are looking to use less chocolate, so they might reduce the size of the product. They might use a chocolate flavouring and more other ingredients, so it's sort of trying to get the same flavour. You might have people who use a baking chocolate, which is a much lower grade chocolate. I know that people in industry who are tied in with supermarket contracts, they're often being forced into those sort of areas. You're seeing a lot of people go out of business, but you're also then seeing a lot of creation. So you might get your chocolate fix by having a bar of caramel and nuts with a smaller coating on the outside, so you might enrobe the product. So those are the sort of different things you're seeing, but you're seeing a lot of creation as well. I think you'll see a lot of new products going out there with good quality but a smaller percentage as a whole of the whole product.
So then we'll still be answering our insatiable appetite for chocolate.
Yeah, you'll still get your fix.
But you at Dorset Chocolate, Johnny, you're sticking to your principles of producing quality chocolate and making quality chocolates, even though the prices will have to rise, I assume?
Well, I mean, that's always the hard bit, and I think that's probably something any craftsman struggles with. So I think that's a common problem. I know that food businesses in Dorset are struggling because we've got a great relationship with our local environmental health lady who's given us loads of advice when we've been building a new factory craft kitchen. But she's very sad with the number of pubs going out of businesses. We're seeing a lot of bakeries shut down because of electricity prices. So I think it's a tough place out there. So we certainly won't be reducing the quality of our chocolate, but I think there's a limit. If someone's going off to buy a present for someone, they want to buy a card and a box of chocolates, they may buy a candle and a card for it, perhaps, because there's a limit to what people can pay, and I think we probably are in a recession. And I know we're quite lucky in lots of parts of Dorset where people may be retired and on fixed incomes, but I think it's quite tough out there. So we are changing some of the things we sell. So we're certainly not changing the recipes, and we keep on selling chocolate bars, but some of our new products are more fudge and caramel based, for example, or chocolate covered, and that gives us a chance to work with some great local growers. So we use local oats, we're using local cream, local butter, and it's quite an exciting time for the chocolatier amongst the firm to actually come up with new products. So it's tough out there, but it's tough for lots of people, and for us it's quite exciting as craftsmen, really.
So despite the challenges and the vagaries of the international cocoa market, you sounded quite positive.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough out there for all sorts of shops. I mean, we supply independents rather than supermarkets, but it's quite exciting to be doing new things and new creations. So that's fun. That's a fun aspect of it.
So finally, we did touch on the fact that perhaps chocolate, or chocolates which contain a lot of the raw material, the chocolate, will end up being a luxury item.
Which I suppose takes us all the way back to sort of 1657 when we first encountered cocoa. So I suppose in some ways it's good that we we value our foodstuffs. It's good that sweet treats are a treat and not something we're munching on every break time. But I think you've just got to look at the positives, and we're sort of certainly focused on keeping our craft alive, and we've got such a broad history to look upon that I think there's ways of us all having a treat in moderation and having something really special. So these things come and go. I'm sure things will calm down a bit, but if we look on a 10-year cycle rather than a 1 or 2 year cycle, it's not a bad thing that cocoa prices have gone up a little bit. And if they ease off, then it should get back to some sort of normal state of affairs, really.
Johnny Baxter, the chocolatier of Dorset Chocolate, taking a sanguine view of the current problem of the cocoa bean market.
Well, that's about it for this episode. Do join us again next time. Until then, it's goodbye from me, Terry Bennett.
And goodbye from me, Jenny Devitt.